Well, thank you. That was a nice introduction. That music made me sound like Darth Vader coming on stage or something. Dum, dum, dum. But no, it's always good to be here. I appreciate JHS inviting me. I'm going to talk with you a little bit today about sort of my research, my thoughts on the 401k industry. I do a lot of writing, a lot of talking in the industry, but we also provide service. That's not my main job. I'm just very passionate about giving our participants, employees in this country, a better experience in their retirement. And I don't think we're doing a very good job of it, frankly, as an industry. But with that said, I'm also going to share with you what, at the end of this presentation, what Lincoln Trust has put together with JHS to allow you to be very different from any advisor out in the community selling to the 401k business. But that's going to be a very small part of this presentation. If you want to learn more about that, we can talk offline. All right, so I'm going to briefly touch on the evolution of the retirement industry, and then I'll talk a little bit about looking ahead and dealing with the participant. How many of you today work with retirement plans, just by a show of hands? And of those, are you working with the employer? And how about participants? Who actually works with participants? Giving advice, not just education, but actually giving advice, trying to get other auxiliary business from the participants. So it looks like a decent amount of you do that as well. So I'm going to touch on that also, and we can make this interactive too. So I love questions. I love people challenging the data, the thinking, so just jump in at any time. Just a real quick background on the company so you have an idea where I'm coming from. Lincoln Trust is a privately held business in Denver, Colorado. We used to be part of a Fortune 500 company. We did a management buyout back in 2009, so we're private again, but our history goes back to 1957. Today we got about 80 employees throughout the United States with offices throughout the country. We administer just over $4 billion in assets, and we have about 3,200 retirement plans today. So we're a decent-sized, small, or independent player. We're not affiliated with Lincoln Financial, the insurance company. We're privately held, and we're not in it, and we don't endorse any products. We are truly a service provider. Many of you may know the retirement timeline, but basically the retirement, as we know it, 401k came into play in the late 70s with the act. The 401k code was established. I won't go through all this, but the two major changes that occurred was in 2001 and 06, 2001 and 2006, with EGTRA and then PPA that made EGTRA permanent. There's been a tremendous evolution of the 401k business, but again, without boring you to sleep here right after lunch, I'm not going to go through all this. Happy to talk about it offline. But what it's done, the trend in the industry has been the defined benefit plan, which many of you understand is employer paid for. The defined benefit plan, the pension plan as we call it, has dramatically declined since the late 70s, where the DC plans have really become the mode that employees need to be saving for their retirement. So you could see in the orange line how the DC plan has really taken over as the participation rates, and this is employee participation, so not quite 35% as of last year. So it's still a long way to go. There aren't a lot of employees that are actually enrolled in a 401k plan when you boil it down to the number of participants. How have 401ks been sold? This is important. I'm going to step down. I feel like I'm so far away from everyone. 401k plans have been traditionally sold back in the 80s from the insurance companies. Why was that? Why did the insurance companies want to sell 401k plans? It's a great way to get their products more distribution. It's a great business model. So they had all these wrapped products, these mutual funds that they could sell. Well, they weren't mutual funds, but essentially their funds, their insurance products, and they were able to now use the 401k to collect those assets. Well, then the mutual funds caught on as they came into being much more so in the 90s. And a lot of the 401k plans, if you look at the data, were really starting to be sold by the mutual fund companies. In fact, they overtook the insurance companies in terms of percentages. And now we're seeing, and you probably have been seeing over the last 5 to 6 years, where this term open architecture has come into play. And the insurance companies, the mutual fund companies, all the product providers, I call them, they say they're open architecture. And that's okay, that's a misused term. But truly what open architecture is, you don't change your pricing as a provider based on the products that are in the plan. Okay? And that's an important distinction. So as far as the traditional marketplace solutions, investment products, we could go through this in detail, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to. Essentially, the mutual fund companies typically have, their products, their funds in the 401k plan, and then sometimes a smattering of others. Insurance companies will typically wrap their products, and then open architecture usually, again, if they're truly open architecture, you can have any investment vehicle that is trading on the NSCC, and sometimes not, but we won't get into the details of that. It's a little more complex. So let's turn to the participant's challenge. Where this industry has failed the participant is we've now gone to the open architecture solution. We say, look, you can have DFA funds, you can have Vanguard low-cost funds, you can have all these great funds if you want them. But then it's up to you as a participant to figure out how to allocate those assets. On our platform, we have alternative assets. Well, that's great, right? To be able to get commodities, real estate, things that you can't traditionally get in the marketplace. Only big pension plans get them. Harvard Endowment, folks like that use alternative assets to bring down the volatility of the portfolio. Well, what happens if a participant goes 100% into a commodity fund? That takes away the reason we have these funds in there. So we have failed the participant by not having proper allocation for the participant. So what have we done now? We started to throw out target date funds. And we'll talk just a few minutes about those. But most financial professionals, which you all are, will say asset allocation is the most important decision that an investor can make. It makes up your return. Some say as high as 98%. You guys probably know better than I do. But it's a high percentage of your return comes from how you allocate your assets. Just some study from the Schwab and Aon Hewitt study. Participants interested in receiving professional advice, 83% said they want professional advice. And only 70% of participants, their sole source of income is their retirement plan outside of Social Security. So this is important stuff we're talking about. And then from these same two studies, 53% of participants say they have no time, knowledge to do this on their own, to allocate their assets. 16% of 401k plan sponsors have said, we will offer professional advice to our participants. So you got 83% that want it, participants, and you have 16% of the employers that plan to offer it. True disconnect in this industry. 87% will outperform when they have help over a 5-year period. That's what the study showed. Help means target date funds, managed accounts, or online advice. And then the typical participant will have 3.7 asset classes, where a professional will have around 8 in terms of when they allocate their portfolio. So again, we're failing the participant miserably here. The growth of target date funds and retirement plans, why do I tell you this? Look how the target date fund has just skyrocketed in terms of assets that have been generated into these funds. The mutual fund companies love these products. Why? Fees, but they can bring in some young hotshot analyst, put him in an incubator, stick him in a target date fund, collect assets, and all of a sudden he gets to manage a portfolio. Some funds do that, not all. But more importantly, it's collecting assets into their funds. Whether they're good funds or not isn't the issue I'm here to talk about, but this has been tremendously successful for the fund companies. Why do target dates fail? They're mostly comprised of a single fund family's funds, and I'll show you a study on that. We could talk about that more. There's a lot of confusion, and has been in the marketplace, the to and through retirement, if you heard of that term. Some of these target date funds were built to go through retirement, some to retirement. Well, back in 09, 08, when the market just tanked, and participants were like, why did I lose 30%? I was in a 2010 target date. Shouldn't it be all fixed income? No, it's 60% stocks. Why? Because it's got another 20-year time horizon. People didn't know that. They didn't understand that. It's not wrong. The fund companies weren't doing anything wrong. It just wasn't communicated properly. Little use of alternative assets. I've challenged any of you to go out and, even the best fund companies out there, and find what kind of alternative investments they have in their target date funds. Very little. And then we can get into this. It's much more complex, but there's a significant difference in the glide path. If you want to research more about that, the Boggleheads, they do a nice piece on that. But there's different types of glide paths, and that impacts the participant, depending on when those assets are changed. I'm going to skip this for the sake of time, but we've talked about this. Target date funds versus professionally managed models. There's big differences here, and you as advisors can have this best of breed or this managed model capability. And we'll talk a little more about this real briefly, but you don't have to use target date funds is the bottom line. All your competitors, or most of your competitors are. Okay, you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace by not using target date funds. You can still use them if you want, but again, there's a lot of failings here, and you could be talking about that when you're sitting with your client, and why managed models are so much, can be so much more of a professional solution or an institutional solution for your client. You don't have the restrictions that are bound by the prospectus. Alternative investments, again, are fully available. You're getting the best of breed funds. You're not beholden to one fund family. Prima Capital, they're now part of Envestnet. They did a great study back in 2009, and they took all the top 15 fund families, and they showed on average these top 15 funds do not get out of the first quartile 23% of the time they average, that their funds are in the top quartile. So what does that mean? If you're in a target date fund, you're in a proprietary product, you have that all 100% of the funds or that one fund family, 77% of the funds on average are probably going to underperform. So you're setting your participants up for failure again. You could show this to a client. When we show this to the CEO and the CFO, when we're in the boardroom talking about their retirement plan, boom. They will change on a dime when they see this kind of data. Then they say, well, what are my alternatives? And that's when we get into the professionally managed accounts. And a lot of our advisors offer that. So kind of the next generation 401k, I call it 401k2. Talked a little bit in Fox Business on this one time. But we did this in our own 401k plan. And basically, we did away with the core investment lineup. So our participants have no choice. We established 5 models from conservative to aggressive. They're risk-based. They're not age-based. We can argue all day long about the differences and why certain ones are better. But I think most people will tell you risk-based is more professionally endowed. But we actually offered these 5 models, and we did a risk questionnaire for every employee, and they were defaulted into one of these models. Now, they can change, but they have no allocation risk, if you will, of doing it themselves. We have it professionally managed. They're going to go into one model. That's a little extreme. I don't see the industry going to this probably for another 5 years, and there's various reasons for that, but I do think it's going to happen because, again, we haven't done the participant the proper service, and when we do, we'll get to managing their assets more properly. But short of that, we have created with JHS what's called Model K solution. Have any of you in the room used this? I know we've had some advisors that have used this with us. But essentially what this is, you've used it? Okay, great. It's managed, third-party, professionally managed portfolios in the 401k plan lineup, along with a core investment lineup. So we haven't done away with the core, because I said that's kind of extreme. Most plans aren't going to take to that yet. And here's the core lineup. A lot of institutional type products. Average investment expense is 35 basis points. So we try to keep the costs down on the core lineup, and then the modeled portfolios have a little higher investment expense because of the professionally managed models. And the 2 firms that we've been using for JHS are Horizon and F Squared. I don't know if you all are familiar with either of these firms, but highly thought of firms in the industry. They do pretty well on a performance basis. And so we then allow these professionally managed models to your participants or to your plan sponsors, so they have the best breed there, and then also the best of breed on the core lineup. It's a wonderful retirement plan, frankly, that JHS has put together, and I would encourage you to learn more about it if you are out there selling, because you will rarely lose when you're in a finals presentation and you can present this properly. The only time you may lose is on name recognition. If somebody just wants Fidelity or they want Vanguard or whatever it is, they'll probably go that way no matter what you say. But when you present all the facts in this product, you're going to win. Our close ratios have been about 90%, which is extreme when we get into the boardroom. So, and we do roughly 20 or so plans a month with our advisors throughout the country. So we're doing okay from that standpoint. If you have any questions, I know my time's up. This is our sales team, our account executives, as we call them. You're welcome to contact any of them. I know some of you have worked with Jared in the past, and you're always welcome to call me. I'm always happy to talk about this.